Well, good morning. Welcome to Compass, our missions navigating people to God. My name is Nate. I'm the pastor here at Compass North Fort Worth, and we're so glad that you're here. So glad that you're worshiping with us today. If you're a guest, an extra special, welcome to you. I would love to meet you after the service is over, so please stop by Next Steps area on your way out today. And as Stacy just said, it's a decision weekend here at Compass across all of our campuses, and we are so excited for many of you who have taken that step of faith. There are some of you, I believe, who might take a crazy step of faith today who didn't even know it when you walked in here this morning, and we've been praying for you as well. And you know, as we begin today, I want to ask you this question: what is something crazy that you've done in your life? Now, I'm not going to make you admit that out loud, and I know that my guess is that some of you have done some pretty crazy things along the way in your life. In fact, I know that you have, because I asked that question on Facebook about a month ago when I was preparing this message, and some of you responded. Let me just say this: some of y'all are crazy, right? Now, some of the responses that we received when I was asking that question were things like, some of you have jumped out of airplanes and parachuted, which I think is absolutely crazy. You've free fallen without a harness. That's crazy. There were more than a few of you who admitted that you've switched drivers while driving on the interstate without actually stopping the car, which is a couple of things. It's impressive, but it's super crazy, all right? Some of you have done things like my family did. You've moved halfway across the United States to start a new life here in Texas. Some of you have done crazy things like you've adopted or fostered multiple kids, which is a little bit crazy as well. And, I was thinking about Pastor Brandon, our executive pastor. He responded on Facebook with what he thought was crazy, and this is what he said: hired Nate Grella, right? And so, which I responded, I let you talk me into it. And some of you laughed at that. It hurt my feelings a little bit, but I've gotten over that. But I've done some crazy things in my life, and I thought about admitting those, and then I thought better of myself today, because I don't think that you actually want to know some of the crazy things your pastor has done when he was a little bit younger. And plus, I know my mom and dad are probably watching online, and I just really don't want to give them a heart attack today. So we're just going to keep moving forward on that. But there have been moments in my life where I've done some crazy things, and the reason I've done crazy things is because I believe that God had called me to do some crazy things. Like, for instance, one of the things that I would admit is pretty crazy is that our family decided a little over 2 years ago that we should pack everything up. We should move from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to Fort Worth, Texas, where we really knew nobody, and launched Compass North Fort Worth. It was kind of crazy, but I'm so glad that we did it, and we're so grateful that God has been on the move, and we see God moving and working in some incredible ways. And today, as we wrap up this series called Dark Horses, we want to look at the story of a guy who God called to do something crazy, and honestly didn't make a whole lot of sense. And as we've been going through this series, my hope is that maybe God would stir within you this desire to take a crazy step of faith in your own life, to do something that when other people look at it, it wouldn't make much sense as well. And it's my prayer, it's been the prayer of our team across all of our campuses, that through this series that there would be many of you who would do some things, and you would take some crazy steps of faith for the thing that maybe breaks your heart. And that I know that some of you have already done that. You've told me about that. You've sent emails about those things. Or you've texted me, or you've talked to me afterwards, or you've talked to somebody on our team. And some of you committed to making some changes in your life, to maybe doing that thing that breaks your heart, that thing that maybe you've made excuses about, or you felt inadequate. You said, you know what, I'm stepping out in faith and I'm trusting God. And we've even been praying that some of you would take this crazy step of faith today to follow Jesus with your life and to be baptized. In fact, I've been praying all week long that somebody may just walk forward today and they might just get baptized in the clothes that they're wearing today. Now, that's kind of crazy, right? But somebody might be willing to do that today. You don't have to do that. We've got everything that you need. We've got extra clothes for you to change into, and you can go home and you can be dry. We've got towels. We've got it all. So don't make excuses if you feel like that's what God's calling you to. But before we get to that point and we celebrate those decisions today, I want to dig into a dark horse story of this guy by the name of Noah. Now, if you've got a Bible or a Bible app, you can turn with me to the book of Genesis, and we find Noah's story in Genesis chapter 6 through chapter 8. And my guess is that whether or not you grew up in the church, you know the story of Noah and the ark. Maybe you grew up in the church and so you heard about it that way, or maybe your idea of Noah is Steve Carell in Evan Almighty, and that's what you think of when you think of Noah. But Noah is a guy who gets called by God to do something really crazy. And to give you a little bit of backstory of what's happening at this time. Now, Genesis is the first book in the Bible. It's when God creates the earth. And so for the first 5 chapters, we find that God has created the earth, and then he has created everything in it, and he's given 2 people charge over everything. You know their story as well. You know the story of Adam and Eve, right? God tells us these 2 that they could eat from any tree in the garden except for this one tree, which is called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He says you can eat any fruit except for the fruit that's the half-shaped moon kind of looking. It's yellow, all right? Okay, maybe it's not that, but I hate bananas, so it has to be that, right? Anyway, they choose to disobey what God had told them to do. And because of that, sin enters into this world, and this world that was good, this world that God had created where everything was good, is broken because of sin. And we find that God's heart is broken because of this. And so we get to chapter 6 here in Genesis, and notice what it says starting in verse 5. It says, "The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on earth. He saw that everything that they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them, and he put them on the earth. It broke his heart. And the Lord said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, and I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, even the birds of the sky. I am sorry I ever made them." And so as we get to Genesis 6, what we see is, as we get to Noah's story, that the world has grown. In fact, archaeologists believe that there's about 1 million people that are living at the time of Noah. But what we read here in these verses that we just looked at is that God is about done with the human race. He's about to give up. His heart is broken. He's kind of like a parent who when your children, they make a poor choice or a bad mistake, you just are so broken because of it. And God's at this point where he is about done with the human race. But then we get to verse 8, and notice what it says. It says, "But Noah found favor with the Lord." Now, as I'm reading this, I'm thinking the writer of Genesis is kind of like Lloyd Christmas in Dumb and Dumber. He's saying, so you're saying there's a chance, right? Like literally. And it's a 1 in a million chance, but God is about to do something crazy, and he's going to call Noah. And notice what it says here about Noah in verse 8. It says, "But Noah found favor." Catch what's happening here. The favor is because Noah was this ordinary, average Joe. And God is going to call him to do something extraordinary. It truly is this dark horse story. And it's through Noah that God is about to give the human race a second chance. Now, why would God choose Noah? I think if you go back and you look at Noah's 23andMe family tree, what you find out is that Noah comes from a long line of godly men. His father was this guy by the name of Lamech. Lamech was a godly man. His grandfather was this guy by the name of Methuselah. Methuselah, as we know, is the oldest man to have ever lived. He lived 969 years. Now, I'm not even 40 yet. My back's hurting. Can you imagine how bad that dude's back had to be hurting? And then there's the great-grandfather, this guy by the name of Enoch. And we read about Enoch that he walks so closely with God that one day God just takes him up to heaven. And so as we look at the family tree of Noah, we see this strong faith background. And then notice what it says about Noah here in verse 9. It says, "This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, the only blameless person living on the earth at the time, and he walked in close fellowship with God." So what we read is that Noah is just like his family. He was the only blameless person living at this time. Now, this doesn't mean that he didn't make poor choices or make mistakes along the way, or even that he sinned, but what it means is this, is that Noah tried his best to live for God. And my guess is that even though God and Noah are tight, they've got this close relationship, what God is about to ask Noah to do is going to seem crazy to him. So here's really what I hope to help answer today. This question that I want to give you here through Noah's story is this: what do you do when you sense God calling you to step out in faith, but it looks crazy to you as well as to others? I think it's through Noah's story that we find the answer to this question. And hopefully, because of what we learned today, that my prayer is that some of you would take those crazy steps of faith in your own walk with God. Now, the first thing that we have to understand when God calls us to do something crazy is that you obey God even when you don't understand it. And look, I get it. Like that statement, you might be thinking, hey, Pastor Nate, that's just crazy what you just said there. Like, why would I do something when I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle? Like I am a planner. I like to know what's going to happen. I want to be able to see the big picture before I take any steps of faith like that. But you're telling me I just have to be crazy and take a step of faith even when I don't understand it. But you know what God calls Noah to do is crazy. It doesn't make sense. And you know what God calls Noah to do, right? He calls Noah, he says, hey, I want you to build this boat that is the length of almost two football fields. I want you to pack 2 of every kind of animal on it because I'm about to flood the earth. Now, this is crazy on multiple accounts. The first reason I think this is crazy is that Noah, at the time God calls him to do this, Noah is 500 years of age. And Noah, when God tells him this, like Noah had to be thinking, man, that's funny, God. Like, I'm kind of going through a midlife crisis right now. A boat's really not what I was thinking about. I was kind of hoping for like the luxury camel that I could travel around town in, not a big cruise ship, And so he's like, this is crazy for Noah in that midst, but God is calling him to do something crazy. What is even crazier though, is he's asking Noah to build a boat, and Noah isn't a boat builder. Like there's no Pinterest boards around where he can get plans off of. He can't watch any YouTube how-to videos on how to build this boat. Like those things didn't exist. And even crazier is that Noah lives 500 miles away from the closest body of water, which is the Mediterranean Sea. So it's not like he can just pull this boat over to the body of water. This just didn't make sense. And so what God does though is he gives Noah these detailed instructions. And I imagine like Noah, he's got his notepad out and he's taking meticulous notes and he's like, yeah, you want me to do, okay. And he gets to the end of it and he's probably thinking, God, this is absolutely crazy. But catch what Noah does next. Verse 22 says this, it says, so Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded. In Hebrews chapter 11, which is the great faith chapter, it says this about the faith of Noah. It says, it was by faith that Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. He obeyed God, who warned him about things that had never happened before. By his faith, Noah condemned the rest of the world, and he received the righteousness that comes by faith. Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded by faith because he obeyed his God. And this is what I love about Noah's story. Like Noah, he decides to take early retirement. He comes home one day and he says, hey, I got this crazy idea. You're not gonna believe it. Actually, it's a crazy idea from God. He tells his family, he says, I wanna enlist you to help me build this ark. And you know what his family does? His family says, you know what? That's a crazy idea, but we love it. And so they join him on this. And I think what we learn from Noah's story here is this. What's crazy in one season will be counted as faith in another. Because at the time, like this didn't make sense. Not just to Noah. This was crazy to Noah. It had to be crazy to his family. But despite this, what we see is they remain faithful to God. And none of them make excuses. Noah doesn't complain, he doesn't delay. In fact, he gets started immediately building this boat. Because Noah had what I would say is some crazy faith, just trusting in God and what God was calling him to. Now let me ask you this. Are you willing to display some crazy faith in what God is calling you to, even though you don't understand it? Because I believe that there's a dark horse story just like Noah's that is waiting to be told through each and every one of us if we would simply have the crazy faith to do what God is calling us to do. Like maybe for someone here today, maybe God is calling you to quit your job, to start that new business, or maybe he's calling you to maybe go out and start that nonprofit or that organization, and you're thinking, this is crazy, God, like, why would I do this? Like I had to have a paycheck, I got to provide for my family. I can't do this is crazy, God. Maybe he's calling you to foster kids or adopt, and you're like, that's crazy, God. We got 2 of our own kids and they're a handful. I don't think we could handle any more kids, but you just feel this desire, this burden to help more kids. And you're like, I don't know why, God, but this is crazy and I don't know that we can do this. Maybe for someone here today, he's calling you to be generous. Maybe he's calling you to write the biggest check that you've ever written in your life to support the ministry here at Compass. And you're thinking, that is crazy, God. Because that money is for retirement, but I know I'm supposed to do this. It's crazy though, God. Why are you asking me to do this? Maybe he's calling you to pursue a new career field or go back to school, and you're thinking, this is crazy, God. We've got 2 kids in college right now, and we can't take on any more student loans. It's just crazy. Maybe he's calling you to be a missionary, to pack up your things, to sell your things, and to move halfway across the world to minister to people in another country. And you're thinking, this is crazy, God. Maybe for some of you here today, he's calling you to follow him with your life, to be the first person in your family, to make that decision, to take that step of faith and follow Jesus with your life. And you're thinking, this is crazy. Like, what will my family think? They may not understand. They may struggle with me taking this step of faith, and you feel like God is calling you to do it, and you're like, this is crazy. Like maybe you hear God's voice saying to you, did you hear what Pastor Nate said earlier? That someone here is gonna take a step of faith, and they're gonna get baptized in the clothes that they're wearing today, and that's you, and you're thinking, no, God, that's crazy. Like, I'm having a really good hair day today, and I want to get my hair wet, or I got lunch plans, or I got plans afterwards. I can't make that decision today. You see, I don't know what it is for you that maybe God is calling you to, but here's what I do know. I believe that God calls all of his followers to crazy faith, to do things that don't make sense in the here and the now, but just to trust him and where he calls us to go. And that's what Noah did. And look, I get it, because like you might be here today and maybe you're new to this whole Christianity thing and Jesus, and you might be thinking to yourself, like, why would I trust in a God that I can't see? Why would I believe the words of a God that I've never been able to have a face-to-face conversation with? And if that's you, if that's something that you're wrestling with today, let me just say this in response. Let me ask you a question. Do you believe in the wind? Like I'm sure you do, because you walked in today. It's a windy day here in Texas, right? You felt the wind, but how did you know it was the wind? You felt it. Somebody told you it was the wind, right? And you believe that it's the wind, yet you don't believe in the God who created the wind. Or wow, the wind is in my microphone right now, so. Or how about this? How many of you have ever had a conversation with somebody like they're the close talker, like right in your face, and they have bad breath? Like, you can smell it, right? But how do you know they have bad breath? Like, you can't see bad breath. There's no like green fumes coming out of their mouth or anything like that. But you can smell it, right? And you believe that it's called bad breath. Like, maybe it's good breath in God's eyes. I don't know. Like, but you believe that, but you don't believe in the God who created bad breath. And that's a whole nother conversation for another day with God, right? You see, Noah, he believed in what God was calling him to, even though he'd never seen a drop of rain before in his life. But he had the faith in what God was calling him to do, so he just starts building this boat. And this wasn't a 1-year project. In fact, the construction time for this boat ends up taking Noah 120 years. He's going to be 620 years of age when he gets done building this boat. And I wonder if there were days where Noah's like, maybe I got the dimensions of this thing wrong. Maybe I misunderstood what God was actually asking me to build. I even imagine there was a time where Noah got to maybe 50 years into building this boat where he's like, God, just stick a fork in me. I'm tired of hammering boards into the side of this boat. I am done. I am through. I even wonder if there were times where he wondered, is it worth all this effort? Is it worth the cost? Have you ever had one of those moments where maybe you felt God was calling you to do something? So you stepped out in faith, you started trusting God, and you go down that path, and you're like, I'm gonna do this, and you start praying about it, and you want God to make the path really clear, but then what happens is nothing really happens, and your patience begins to wear thin. I know I've experienced this in my own life. But what I've come to realize is this, that God's timing is always different than my timing. For me, I'll admit, I'm like a quick results kind of guy. I want to see things like tomorrow. I want to see things happen pretty quickly, but it doesn't always happen that way. And sometimes God has to remind me, Nate, you just need to be patient and you need to wait on me. And that's what Noah had to do. Noah ends up waiting for 120 years. And you see, maybe the thing that you committed to a couple of weeks ago, that you filled out one of those cards, just like those cards are on your chair again. I asked our team to put those there, because maybe some of you didn't fill those cards out. Maybe you still need to do that. But maybe that thing that you committed to a couple of weeks ago, that thing that breaks your heart, you've been praying that God would open a door for you, and you've been praying about this for some time, and it just hasn't happened, and your patience is wearing thin. Let me just say this, don't give up, don't lose hope, don't lose faith, because that thing that you want to do for God, that God is calling you to, could just be just right around the corner. And that's what we see in Noah's story. Now, the second thing that we see when we step out in faith and we take these crazy steps of faith for God, just like we saw in Nehemiah's story in week 1, and we also saw in Daniel's story last week, is this, we see it in Noah's story, is that you've got to ignore the detractors. You got to keep moving forward. Can you imagine how many people must have made fun of Noah? I mean, as the days went on and they see Noah building this boat, can you imagine how many of them thinking like, Noah, why are you doing this? Because they'd never seen rain either. And this whole idea of flooding the earth, like they just thought that Noah was crazy. And this whole idea of like building this Carnival cruise ship didn't make sense to them. And I imagine as the years went on, the heckling got worse. People would walk by, they'd have their boombox on their shoulder. They'd be playing a little bit of Ozzy Osbourne, Crazy Train, right? So somebody probably hired a little CeeLo Green to come in and going, that baby crazy, right? Like just to remind him how off this rocker this dude really was. Because Noah, to the outside people, he looked crazy. You know what I love about people here at Compass is we got a whole bunch of crazy people that come to these campuses, all of our campuses, all 5 of our campuses every week. And you know why I say they're crazy? Because they do crazy things like we had hundreds of people last year who went on mission trips. They took PTO and vacation time, and they didn't go to the beach, and they didn't sit on the beach with that nice little drink with the umbrella in it and just sunbathe. No, they went to these places, these third world countries, and they just witnessed to, and they loved people the way that God loves each and every one of us. And to the outside world, that just seems a little bit crazy. What I love here at Compass is that we've got a whole bunch of people who are really crazy generous when it comes to their finances, and they give to the ministry here at Compass, and they make sure that this campus and all of our campuses exist and keep moving forward, and that we can do things like pay off land and get ready to build a building. And some of you went above and beyond this past year, and you gave to help pay off that $660,000 in debt, and because of that, we're debt free, and you were crazy generous, and because of that, like other people, they would look at your checking account and they would go, why do you give on a regular basis? Why do you give twice a month to the ministry at Compass? That just seems weird to them. It seems crazy. What I love is we have people who are crazy, who will volunteer to serve at 1 hour, and they'll come and worship in another hour. So they'll leave their house before 9 o'clock and they won't get home till afternoon. And the neighbors see them leave and they think, why in the world would somebody be crazy enough to go and spend half of their day off at church on a Sunday? See, they don't understand. They think we're crazy. But you see, that's what dark horse type people are like. Because dark horse people, they ignore doubters and they keep moving forward even when it seems crazy to other people. I like what Philip Yancey says about Noah, and I think it's so true of our own lives as well when we take these steps of faith. He says this, faith means trusting in advance what will only make sense in reverse. And this is so good. It got me thinking about, what has happened here at Compass North Fort Worth. 2016, I'm still living in Pennsylvania. I had no idea that I'd ever be in Texas. But the leaders of Compass, Pastor Drew, our lead pastor, and the elders, they got together one day and they said, you know what, we should start a new campus in either the North Richland Hills area or the Hazlet area. And so they tasked two guys on staff at the time at Compass, Luke Davidson, who is now the NRH campus pastor, and Rob Jones, who we all love, right? Who's our worship pastor here at North Fort Worth. And they said, you guys are going to start a new campus together. And so they started having these interest meetings and gatherings. They had some in North Richland Hills. They had some in North Fort Worth. And what happened is, along the way, Luke, who lived in North Richland Hills, he felt called to that area. But Rob and Kitsy, they were like, you know what, we feel called to this North Fort Worth area. And so they went to the leaders and they said, you know what, Pastor Drew, we both are feeling called to two different areas. And Pastor Drew and the elders, they said, you know what, maybe we should have some crazy faith and we shouldn't just launch one campus, we should launch two campuses. And that seemed crazy at the time to do. But here we are, if you look in reverse, in just a few weeks, March 25th, we'll celebrate 2 years as a campus here, and God has been on the move and is working in incredible ways. Our NRH campus, they just celebrated their 2-year anniversary back in January, and what we've seen happen because of that and these two campuses that have launched is we see two vibrant, healthy, and rapidly growing churches. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, between our two campuses, we had over 1,200 people in attendance. 1,200 people who were not, we can celebrate that. 1,200 people who maybe didn't have a church home a little over 2 years ago. And some people, they thought we were crazy for launching two campuses within 10 weeks of one another. I mean, even days where we thought we were crazy for doing it, but we look back and we see all that God has done. And honestly, it was crazy. But it was crazy because we had this crazy faith to do what God was calling us to do, and we just obeyed God's calling, and we ignored the doubters, and we kept moving forward. There's one more thing from Noah's story that I want to share with you today as well that I think we've got to understand when it comes to our own dark horse stories, and that is this. You've got to maximize your opportunity while the doors are still open. Because here's the reality. I believe in this room today, there are many dark horse stories that have yet to be told. There are many dark horse stories that have yet to be told because some of you have not maximized the opportunity that's in front of you. And if you're not careful, what can happen is you can miss out on your opportunity. And understand this. This is not me saying this to scare you. This is not me saying this as a threat to you, but we don't know when our time here on this earth will be up. No one knows the day or the hour, but we only have a limited window of opportunity. And the reality is we have to understand that. For Noah, he waited 120 years. He faced ridicule, doubts, and waiting, but the door finally opens for him. And we get to Genesis chapter 7 and verse 1. It says this. When everything was ready, the Lord said to Noah, go into the boat with all your family, for among all the people of the earth, I can see that you alone are righteous. After 120 years, Noah gets the green light. God says, Noah, it's time to go. It's time to move. Now, this word go, it actually comes from the Hebrew word that means come. Understand what God was saying to Noah at this point. He's saying, Noah, you've done the work. You've done everything that you need to. Now it's time for your family to come into the ark for the purpose that I have for you, which was what? To save the world from total destruction. And so Noah and his family, they board this boat and they invite their neighbors to get on the boat, but nobody gets on it with them. And so Noah and his family, they pack the boat, they put 2 of every animal on it. And then God says, all right, Noah, since nobody else is getting on, it's time to close the doors. For the next 6 days, Noah and his family, I'm sure they felt more extreme ridicule because nothing happens. The doors close, it doesn't rain, there's not a drop in the sky that comes down. And they're thinking, yeah, Noah, how about that flood that your God told you about? And I imagine like on night 6, Noah is kind of like, man, I don't know how much more I can take of this. But it's like, God, I'm just going to keep trusting you. And so he's on the deck of this ark, and he's walking back and forth, and he's going, God, please just provide that rain. Help me know that I'm not crazy. Maybe that I was just hearing things. God, just please. And as he's praying to God, and I imagine this drop of rain hits him on the head. He's like, what was that? And as he's looking up in the sky, another drop hits him. And then the drops start to fall, more and more drops, faster and faster, until there is this torrential downpour. And it rains that entire night, and the next day it's too late. The ark begins to float. And for the next 40 days, it starts to just pour down rain. The earth is flooded, and all those people who thought that Noah and his family were crazy, they get washed away. You see, the door of opportunity had closed. And here's the thing. Like Noah, I believe that there are many of you that God is calling to step out in faith. That God has called you to go and to do something for him. And honestly, maybe you're sitting here today and you're wrestling and you're fighting with God, and you're like, God, I don't want to do it. No, God, not right now, God. I can't. God, it's not the right time for me. And honestly, if you're not careful, if you keep telling God no, you can find that the door of opportunity for you will close just like it did for those who didn't get on the boat with Noah. I believe that there are many of us here today who simply need to have some crazy faith, just like Noah did, and just step out in faith and trust God with the results, because God is calling us to go. You know, a few weeks ago, we talked about the story of Esther. Rory Green, who's our discipleship pastor, he shared with us. And at the end of that message, he had you all fill out these cards, these dark horse cards, like the ones that are sitting on your chair. And then we had these buckets passed, and we had these turned in, and many of you filled out those cards, and you committed to certain things. And as we got those cards in, and the next week we were reading through them, and I was like, man, I want to share some of these things that some of you all said you were going to do, these dark horse stories that you are starting to tell, so that maybe someone around you would know what others are willing to do. And so I just wanted to read some of these to you today as we kind of close out. So I'm going to grab this mic over here. These are what some of these cards said. I commit to making our church a place of peace and true love, and with diversity, inclusion. I commit to developing an infertility, pregnancy, loss support group and ministry. I commit to find courage to witness to my family. I commit to following Jesus and tithing, investing in the people around me. I commit to helping other young adults be navigated to God. I commit to help change the life of a child in need of a family. I commit to sending at least one student to camp. I commit to foster, adopt. I commit to pay off all debt, to give. I commit to being fearless about what's next. I commit to my wife. I commit to letting go of the past. I commit to love those who need God's love, to meet them where they are, whenever, wherever. I commit to living. I commit to finishing out financial peace and stop living a life as a race, but to live as God intended. I commit to sharing my story of anxiety and panic attacks in a way that will help lead others to Christ. I commit to kill my sins. I commit to getting baptized on decision day. You know, as I read those, I thought, man, those are awesome stories. People who are willing to step out in faith to what God is calling to. That's what dark horse stories look like. And my prayer is that some of you would do just like that last card said, would commit to getting baptized today before you leave here. You know, a couple weeks ago, or actually last weekend, I invited everybody to stand up at the end of the service. And we were singing this song together, and we had the towels up here last weekend, and I just said, you know, if anybody needs to make that decision to follow Jesus with their life, take 20 seconds of insane courage and come to the front as we sing this song and grab one of these towels. And during this hour last week, I was just standing over here to the left, and Anthony was to the right, and it was about halfway through the song, and nobody had come at that point, and I just started praying, God, I just pray that you would work on the heart of somebody that needs to come today. And about that time, there was some movement that happened on this side about halfway back. And down the aisle came this guy named Bobby in his wheelchair being pushed down the aisle. And Bobby's here today. And Bobby grabbed one of these towels with tears in his eyes, and he said, I want to make the decision to get baptized next week. And Bobby's going to get baptized here in a few minutes. He's going to get pushed back down the aisle, and some of the guys here at the church are going to help lift Bobby into the baptistry. You see, Bobby, he was in a terrible accident back in December. He was riding his motorcycle to work one day, and a car pulled out in front of him. And he hit that car going 50 miles an hour. And Bobby said, I'm lucky to be alive. Bobby almost died. But Bobby today knows, because of what this choice that he's making, where he's going to spend eternity. And no matter what happens the rest of his life, he knows that he will be with Jesus. And my prayer for some of you today is that you would be like Bobby was last week, and you would take 20 seconds of insane courage, and you would come to the front and you make that decision to follow Jesus with your life. That maybe some of you would take that step and you'd be the first person in your family to ever do it. Or maybe that you would change the script in your family by coming to Jesus, and you would make that decision today. And so we're going to just stand here in a second, and I'm going to invite you, if you've never made that decision or you want to make that decision today, you can do that as we sing this song today. And for those of you who have already made that decision today, I just want to encourage you as we sing this song and we pray these prayers and we just talk about what it is that we've talked about over the last several weeks, that some of you would commit to doing that thing, to stepping out in faith to what God has been calling you to have some crazy faith to whatever it is, and that you would do those things that maybe you've been making excuses about. That maybe that thing that you felt inadequate about, or that thing that breaks your heart, you would say, God, here I am, use me. Here I am, send me. I'm yours. So right now, here's what I want you to do. I just want you to stand with us as we sing this song today. And if you want to come and you're making that decision to be baptized, you can come to the front. Maybe you didn't know you were going to do that. Come grab a towel and we'll get you all this stuff, and you can go get changed, or you can get baptized in the clothes that you're wearing. Or if you just need prayer, our team's going to be up front here for those things, those dark horse decisions that you've been thinking about as well. And so you can come for prayer as we sing this song today as well.